TESOL Pop, Season 10, Episode 3. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura and joining me today is the founder of Creativity Sown, Kirsten Holt. In this episode, we talk about experiential learning and how it can power your professional development. Let's join the conversation where I ask Kirsten to explain what experiential learning is.
Experiential learning is a really interesting area of CPD's professional development. It's basically our deep dive into learning and looking at it from a practical point of view rather than just the theoretical. And the easiest way to explain it is giving you an example. Say you've heard a great activity from one of your fellow teachers, or indeed you thought of experiential learning, and you think, what is that? What am I going to do with it? The first step is to actually take that idea and try it out in the classroom. So you experience the activity, you actually do it, perform it. And afterwards, you then reflect on what went well and what didn't. And in this point, honestly, it doesn't matter if it went completely wrong. It's your learning. What happened? What did you do from that makes you think, oh, I need to do it differently next time? You then process it. You can discuss it with colleagues. You can reflect on your own. And then you try it again. You try it either with the same class a few weeks later. Don't do it side by side and straight away, but try it again within the class and see how it works better. You might have changed the way you've using your rubrics, for example. Your instructions to the class, you might have changed it. Try it again, and then you begin to roll it out to more classes, different levels. You might have tried it with an intermediate class first, and now you're trying it with an upper intermediate class or an elementary class. Assess it, and you keep going round. There's a really interesting model that we've got on the website where people can see how it works in practice. So it's basically activating knowledge, developing expertise, pushing through your comfort zone. Don't always try and do the same thing over and over again. You're familiar. It's putting you into something that you're uncomfortable with doing, just to see if it works in the classroom. And then weigh up whether it is something you want to do again in your context or you want to share with other teachers to try in their context. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's brilliant. And I think that's so relatable for the teachers that are listening. They probably take their learners through that journey regularly as they're developing skills as well. And what really resonated with me when you were describing this process is that it's okay for it not to go well and not to be hard on yourself if you're trying something for the first time. And I think as teachers, we don't always give ourselves that slack. I'm thinking perhaps of my own practice and trainers, teacher trainees I've worked with, where they often make a beeline for like, oh, this didn't go well and I should have done this and I did this wrong. And that can be quite off-putting for them to even try it again. Do you find that's a similar kind of conversation you have?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And I think actually you learn more from your mistakes than you do if it goes well, because you can always think, afterwards, it's the analysing afterwards of what went right and then what didn't. And you think, well, what is it that I did? Did I put my instructions in the right way? Okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to refine them better? And you build on that knowledge through your practice. So it becomes a lot more ingrained and it's something you end up doing as second nature. So it's a really effective way to take it forwards. I've always found it such an interesting area because I did a kitchen refit in my house not so long ago, and I had a big cupboard, and in the cupboard was all these papers from IATEFLs and from lots of conferences and all the notes that I'd taken. This was back in the day before we went onto computers and our phone and making notes. But anyway, a huge pile of papers, and I brushed the dust off it, and thought, oh, crikey. I actually hadn't looked at all these very useful notes that I'd taken. And I just put them aside as something nice to have. Experiential learning is really saying, okay, I'm going to pick one of those and I'm going to try it straight away in my classroom. And then you really activating the knowledge rather than leaving it sort of gathering dust in the corner, and even metaphorically.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Like, just kind of like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just try it, just go and put it into action. This is so wonderful that you're so passionate about experiential learning. I wonder what your story is and your experiences in using this in your own practice. Could you give us a little window into how you discovered this or fell in love, I should say, with this approach?
Well, yes, I think I fell in love with it from going back to when we were in the staff room and we had a classroom guru, as we called it. H was his nickname. And we used to ask him for ideas and like say, oh, I'm stuck with a particular form of grammar. Can you help me? And H would come out with, well, you could try this and try that. And then you thought, well, that's nice. That's taking his advice and applying it verbatim. But is that really helping me with my learning? And it then made me start thinking, well, okay, I need to take that and experiment with it and twist it and try and make it work for me, molding it into my own practice. So that I think was when it started from. But it's a bit like a catalyst. When you start talking about experiential learning, it makes other people start thinking, even in our conversation. I know you're thinking about teacher training and like it is something we are doing with our students. It's just now like saying, take it into the classroom or into our teacher training with our own practices. So links of you're so familiar with task-based learning if you've been using it in the classroom, discovery learning. It's kind of now thinking, well, hey, that we can see is working and we know it's effective with our students. So why don't we try and use it in our own learning? And that's when it sort of developed. It was really interesting, actually. I had a teacher in one of the schools I worked in who had a box in the back of his classroom. And on the box, there was like different files for pre-intermediate, intermediate, etc. And he would get down the same box, irrespective of whether he was teaching Italian teenagers in the summer that came for a 2-week course, or he was teaching Korean students that come over for a year's course. And he would pick out the box and get it down and teach exactly the same thing. And he did it year in, year out. And I was thinking, gosh, well, that's nice for you, but how boring is that? If we push our knowledge forwards and we try and encourage people to experiment, we suddenly enrich everyone's teaching and it makes the staff room a much more positive place as people are sharing ideas and building experience. And even if you don't have a staff room, you can try it out at home. There's websites and platforms. Facebook is great, where you can start asking each other for ideas and build up your practice that way. Or indeed, we'll come on to it in my own website. We'll be having communities of practice.
And that can change a whole kind of atmosphere, like you said, in a school or among a community of teachers. When I'm thinking about like the new AI things and things that are kind of coming into the foray of teaching and how reactionary I've seen some people's responses to that and fearful. But what I feel is with creating this kind of community of practice that is leaning into experiential learning, trying new things, not being afraid to try things, not being afraid of things going a bit messily, whether it's in our own practice or trying with our students, it makes the new things that come into the industries, that the external things, a little less intimidating, I feel, when you're like, okay, this is something new. ChatGPT being a big example that's happened over the past 2 years, shall we say. I'm not afraid to try it. I'm not afraid to be a learner, be a beginner and give it a go. And you know what, maybe I can do that with my students and we'll be beginners together.
Oh, definitely. And that's using AI actually is a really good example because there's so much out there. I mean, I think they said in IATEFL there's like 160,000 100,000 apps out there at the moment. Now, obviously, as one teacher, you can't do all of that. And we can't even delve into all the possibilities of ChatGPT. But if I took a little bit and I tried it in my classroom, or I wanted to do it, good example, I wanted to write a paper to send off for a conference, I could put the AI, my experiment of making my proposal and then using AI to break it down to the 120 words I've got to get it into. And then my fellow teacher could try it with writing a lesson plan and then report back on that. So we could try our own little experiments. And then together, we've ended up with a much wider practice of AI than we would have done if we'd just done it on our own. So it sort of does this, it does develop this real engaged, motivating staff room where people are really sharing and building up their learning practice rather than doing the same old day after day. So it does create a real air of positivity. So I do suggest that people try it, even on a small idea.
I love these examples that you're giving, both from your own practice on what inspired you to start using experiential learning, to this example here of like bite-sized things working together, building a new kind of understanding of something that otherwise could be quite intimidating for one teacher to take on alone. What I'd love to do before we close up today is to just give it like a little parting gift to listeners who are thinking, gosh, I'm so inspired, but I don't know where to start with experiential learning. Where can I get started and start bringing this into our practice? Where would you suggest that they begin?
So I would first of all have a little brainstorm session in your staff room of ideas that you want to try out. Could be anything. Let's take AI, for example. You want to show avoiding plagiarism in the classroom and how you can use AI. So one example is you could get students to write an essay. It doesn't matter if they've used ChatGPT, but afterwards quiz them on how they made their essay. What steps did they take? What was their planning process? Get them to talk about that. Try it with your class. If it works and you think, right, okay, I can use that again, then run it with a different class, different level. If you haven't got a different level, have a chat with a fellow teacher and ask them to do the same thing. Then bring your ideas back together. I would love to know how you get on. You can share your ideas with me on my website. Also find me on LinkedIn. And we've been developing this communities of practice where people can share their ideas. So don't worry if you don't even have a staff room. I know some of you are working on your own out there, and that's fine. You can share them with me and the community, and we can build up our experiential learning practice. So do come and find us there, and we'll look forward to hearing how you get on.
That's brilliant. What a lovely space to create, an intentional space where teachers from all different backgrounds as well can come together to try out new things and be inspired and, develop their practice as a result. What's the name of the website that teachers can find this at?
Thanks, Laura. That's www.creativitysown.com. And I think it's really nice to mention that I also am doing experiential learning in my own practice. I worked for a company in the past who had a slogan, always learning. And I think that I've taken that forward ever since. So I am learning with experiential learning. So bear with the website as we build up. We will be adding to the practice, adding things. So feedback is always welcome because that helps me do my experiential practice in developing a website. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, for sharing today. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you as well.
To learn more about Kirsten's work, you can follow her on Facebook, LinkedIn, and go to her website, Creativity Sown. As always, I've included those links in the show notes so you can find those easily. If you've got a question or an idea that you'd like to pitch to the podcast, then you can go to the website tsolpop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do here at TESOL by sharing the episode with your teaching community, by leaving a rating review wherever you listen to the podcast, or by even buying us a coffee by going to ko-fi.com/TESOLpop.